Many of these albums were criticized when they first came out, but they ended up selling a monumental number of copies all over the world. Behind those records are surprising stories that few people know. Today, we are going to discover the 10 best-selling rock albums of all time, and one of them still generates millions every year. Let's begin. Number 10. Appetite for Destruction by Guns N' Roses. In the heart of the 1980s, in the Los Angeles music scene, an unknown band appeared with a hunger for glory, Guns N' Roses. In 1987, they released their debut album, Appetite for Destruction, a raw, fierce, and powerful record, made with an almost obsessive attention to detail. Steven Adler recorded the drums in 6 days, but Axl Rose and Slash spent months polishing their parts. The album included songs like Welcome to the Jungle, Sweet Child O' Mine, and Paradise City, making it clear that hard rock was not dead. It was only waiting for someone to make it roar again.
Welcome to the jungle. We got money. Take me home.
The result? Around 29 million physical copies sold. Not bad for a debut album. For those who lived through that era, listening to this record today is like opening a door to the days when everything was leather, rebellion, and freedom. But wait, the next album on this list sold even more. And it all began with an accident in the studio. Number 9. Brothers in Arms by Dire Straits. Mark Knopfler did not need to shout to be heard. With his soft voice and unmistakable guitar style, he won the heart of an entire generation with Dire Straits. In 1985, they released their 5th album, Brothers in Arms. The recording was long and troubled, marked by the departure of several members. But in the middle of the chaos, an accident happened that would change everything. During a rehearsal, Knopfler improvised a riff while the microphones were badly positioned and pointing at the floor, capturing a strange, raw sound. Something different. The band liked that sound so much that they decided to keep it, and that is how the legendary Money for Nothing riff was born. The album went on to sell more than 30 million copies, and became the first album in history to pass 1 million sales on CD. With classics like Walk of Life and Money for Nothing, its elegant sound conquered an entire generation. Today, listening to Brothers in Arms again is like opening a window into a time when we were moving from vinyl to CD, and music videos were beginning to shine on MTV. But the impact of the album coming next was even more spectacular. Number 8. Born in the USA by Bruce Springsteen. By the time Bruce Springsteen released this album, he already had 6 studio records behind him. Although he enjoyed fame and recognition, he had not yet become a true rock icon. But that was about to change. True to his prolific and socially committed style, Bruce Springsteen spent 2 years recording Born in the USA. For the project, he wrote as many as 90 songs, but chose only 12. The biggest change for The Boss was the shift toward pop and rockabilly elements, along with the polished production and huge drum sound that defined the era. The themes of the songs were rooted in the efforts and struggles of the working class and in patriotism. The result was impressive. Born in the USA was not only the peak of Springsteen's popularity, it also reached more than 31 million copies sold and earned its place among the most successful albums in history. The album included timeless classics such as Dancing in the Dark, Born in the USA, and Glory Days. It also spent 4 weeks at the top of the Billboard 200, another 84 weeks in the top 10, and more than 3 years on the chart, securing his fame for the long run. And so, Bruce's unique voice found in Born in the USA, a way to carry his message of optimism to the entire world. Its legacy is immeasurable, and even today it remains a key piece of American pop-rock culture. But while Bruce was telling us about factories, broken dreams, and national pride, another band broke this record, inviting us into a mysterious hotel that, once you entered, was impossible to leave. Number 7. Hotel California by Eagles. Eagles had just released the most successful album of their career, their greatest hits, 1971 to 1975. That album marked the departure of founding member Bernie Leadon and the arrival of Joe Walsh as a permanent guitarist. This change allowed the band to break away from its country-influenced beginnings and move into the pop-rock sound that would define its future. With this new lineup and Bill Shimchick as producer, Eagles entered the Record Plant Studios in Los Angeles. As an interesting detail, Black Sabbath were recording Technical Ecstasy in the studio next door, and Eagles had to pause the recording and redo some takes because the sound beside them was so loud that it bled into the microphones. This was also the record where Eagles used Don Henley's voice as the lead on songs like Hotel California and Victim of Love over Don Felder's, achieving a new sound that was closer to radio.
What kind of love have you got? Hotel California.
After being certified 26 times platinum, selling 32 million records, and winning 2 Grammys, Hotel California became the signature album of a band that knew how to capture the spirit of endless highways and the desert in hits that traveled across the entire world.
How they dance in the courtyard.
For Don Henley, the chemistry among the members of Eagles reached its highest point on this record, as songwriters, musicians, and friends. But the album coming next did not only achieve that, it also marked the beginning of an era of psychedelia and sonic revolution that would change rock forever. Number 6. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by The Beatles.
Though the news was rather sad.
The Beatles' 8th album was not just another record in their discography, nor was it just another record in music history. It is the cornerstone of the psychedelic and progressive rock that would dominate the next 2 decades.
It was 20 years ago today.
For many critics, including Rolling Stone magazine, and for countless fans, Sgt. Pepper's is the greatest album in the history of rock. The sonic experimentation, the blend of influences, the instruments from different cultures, and unforgettable songs like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds and A Day in the Life gave the Beatles a new place in music history. They were no longer the teenage sensation of Beatlemania, but a group of adult musicians willing to change the course of history.
Picture yourself in a boat. I saw the photograph.
And won 4 Grammy Awards, including Album of the Year, an honor no other rock artist had achieved until then. Spent 27 weeks at the top of the charts in the United Kingdom, 15 weeks in the United States. But that is not all. Sgt. Pepper's sold more than 32 million copies. By 2018, Sgt. Pepper's was still the best-selling album in the history of England. Sgt. Pepper's is still a musical revolution today, one that continues to create fans in every corner of the earth. But the album that came after it was even more colossal. It shattered this record and surpassed it with overwhelming force. Number 5. Led Zeppelin IV by Led Zeppelin. Starting an album with screams as primitive as they are perfect, a blazing guitar riff, the heavy and flawless rhythm of a precise bass, and a beast of a drummer is a recipe that still makes Led Zeppelin IV an irresistible record for generations. But how did they manage to compose such a work of art in the restless 70s? The key to their success was getting rid of every distraction and retreating to a country house in Wales with the Rolling Stones' mobile studio. Not only could they stay away from the temptations of bars and touring, there was also nothing else to do except play and record, or walk through the grass drinking tea. Guitarist and producer Jimmy Page was able to capture, for the first time, the untamed spirit of the Zeppelin beast in their rehearsal sessions. Songs like Rock and Roll and the epic Stairway to Heaven opened a new chapter in Led Zeppelin's career.
If there's a bustle in your lonely.
And Led Zeppelin IV sold more than 37 million copies worldwide, earning 24 times platinum certification from the RIAA. Just 8 songs gave these 4 musicians the legendary status of stadium rock demigods. Even today, their music, and especially this album, is impossible for any rocker on the planet to ignore. But if you thought that number of sales was already enormous, the next album surpassed it, with a much softer and more pop-oriented sound. Number 4. Rumors by Fleetwood Mac. Fleetwood Mac had reached the greatest success of their career with their self-titled 1975 album, but the band had no idea about the avalanche of changes that would happen in just a few months. Internal conflicts, addictions, and romantic fights would become a trial by fire. If they managed to get through it, success unlike anything they had ever dreamed of was waiting on the other side. Vocalist and keyboardist Christine McVie divorced bassist John McVie after 8 years. Drummer Mick Fleetwood discovered an affair between his wife and his best friend, and new members Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham were in a stormy on-and-off relationship. In the middle of that hurricane of personal problems, rumors emerged like a rose in the storm and allowed them to ease the outside tension. The album included classics like Dreams, Don't Stop, and Go Your Own Way, a mosaic of clashing voices, acoustic and electric guitars, struggling optimism, and naked emotion. The result was an album that launched their career to the very top and cemented their legacy, selling more than 40 million copies and winning the Grammy for Album of the Year in 1978. The members of Fleetwood Mac would continue to change, but this moment, captured in the studio in every detail, became a balm for the wounds of entire generations. Even today, it sounds fresh, powerful, and natural. But the next album coming up surpassed rumors by a wide margin, selling truly staggering numbers. Number 3. The Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. The most important exponents of progressive rock and concept albums reached their highest point in 1973 with The Dark Side of the Moon. It was an album where they allowed themselves to explore sound and managed to push the limits of what was possible, setting a precedent for all the music that would come after. It all began at drummer Nick Mason's house. Roger Waters proposed that the others create an album built around a concept. They also designed the live shows as part of that same idea. It was the first time in music history that a band moved truckloads of equipment to create a staged production at every concert. They played it live for the first time almost a year before its release, in 1972, for the press. After the positive response, they kept performing it live before it was even finished. That period of experimentation allowed them to adjust every detail of their masterpiece. At the end of the tour, they returned to EMY Studios, today Abbey Road, and gave the final touches to a legendary, revolutionary, and timeless album. The result was a record that sold more than 45 million copies, spent almost 1,000 weeks on the Billboard charts, and is recognized as the best-selling album of the 70s and the third best-selling album in history. The impact of The Dark Side of the Moon on world music is incalculable. Songs like Money and Time touch on themes that run through all of humanity, while Us and Them and The Great Gig in the Sky are musical pearls that will never grow old. But the next record, Born from Tragedy, ended up selling numbers that seemed impossible in the music industry. Number 2, Back in Black by AC/DC. Before entering the studio in Nassau, Bahamas, tragedy had struck AC/DC hard. Their singer, with whom they had just recorded the successful Highway to Hell, accidentally passed away after a drunken night. The band, devastated by the loss, considered breaking up, but the family of Bon Scott, the late singer, convinced them to continue, at least in his memory. With producer Mutt Lange, the band decided to record the best album of their career. All eyes and all the pressure were on Brian Johnson, the new singer. Between the producer's perfectionism, the enormous shoes he had to fill, the unpredictable tropical weather, and the strange atmosphere, Brian came close to breaking several times. But that was not all. The studio walls had no acoustic treatment, and the equipment was held up in customs while the band spent days trapped between concrete walls and new songs. But AC/DC is a band that managed to overcome every obstacle their career placed in front of them, and from tragedy came their greatest success, a record that would put them in an emblematic place, the greatest rock and roll band in the world. Back in Black, with an entirely black cover as a sign of mourning for Bon Scott, broke every record, selling 50 million copies and becoming the best-selling classic rock and roll album in history. Songs like Back in Black, Hell's Bells, and You Shook Me All Night Long made entire generations dance. And even today, they still sound fresh, optimistic, and powerful on radio stations around the world. AC/DC left an indelible legacy with a perfect record. They inspired millions of fans to turn up the guitar, sing from the heart, and surrender to the wild spirit of rock and roll. And if every record on this list seemed impossible to surpass, the one coming next rose as the absolute peak, with unbelievably monumental sales. Number 1, Thriller by Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson was frustrated at the end of the 70s. Despite the success of 1979's Off the Wall, which sold 10 million copies, magazines were not putting him on the cover, and he felt alone and abandoned by the industry, his friends, and his family. He decided to make an album built around a concept. Every song could be released as a single, with no B-sides, only hits. He joined forces with legendary producer Quincy Jones, and out of the 30 songs they wrote, only 9 remained. The album also featured a long list of heavyweights, from Paul McCartney to Eddie Van Halen, giving it all the different musical shades that made it unique and capable of reaching every corner of the planet. And that is how Thriller was born, released at the end of November 1982, with a total investment of $750,000, roughly $2.5 million today. Thriller began by selling 1 million copies per week, then doubled that figure and reached 70 million copies worldwide. It is the best-selling album in rock history, 20 million ahead of second place. But that is not all. It also won 8 Grammys and took Michael to the White House. In addition, Thriller was the first album in history to use music videos not simply as promotion, but as individual little works of art. Videos like Billie Jean, Beat It, and most notably Thriller, revolutionized the world and the way large-scale music promotion was understood. Thriller opened a category of icon for Michael Jackson that remained vacant after his passing. It raised him to the Mount Olympus of legends, a place occupied only by figures like Elvis Presley. Even today, decades later, Thriller is the standard by which pop rock is measured around the world. Michael had a dream, and this album became far more than even he could have imagined. These albums did not only break records, they also marked unforgettable moments in our lives. But just as there are albums, there are also songs that sold an enormous number of copies, so many that they changed the course of history. I invite you to discover the 10 best-selling songs in the history of rock. Click on the next video, and I will see you there, my rocker friend.